It's Friday Coffee with your mortgage man, Eric, baby. Woo! And today, let's talk about the F word, fraud. And more specifically, occupancy fraud. So it's interesting that most consumers really don't fully understand what that means. And it really covers a large umbrella of different types of occupancy fraud that are out there or that can happen. And I think the most common one, we're going to talk about two, I think in my opinion, probably the most two that come up. The most common one that's taking place right now, seeing a lot of it, or at least people inquiring about it. And here's what it is. Somebody wants to buy a vacation home, right? There's nothing wrong with that, right? But what happens, and wherever, they're coming from Minnesota, California, Colorado, New York, it doesn't matter. And they want to buy a vacation home here in Arizona. Not uncommon, right? But they allude to the fact that they want to Airbnb it. Yeah, but we're going to stay in there, a week or two a year. So it's going to be our vacation home, but we want to Airbnb it. I'm like, well, that's an investment property. Why is that an investment property? Because you're going to make money off of it. It's an investment. You're going to be renting it out. Whether you rent it out yourself, whether you hire a property management company, whether you VRBO it, whether you Airbnb it, doesn't matter. If somebody's coming in there to rent for a weekend or a week or a month, it doesn't matter. That is now an investment property, even if you decide to truly stay in it for a week or 2 weeks of the year. And that's taken place quite frequently. Now, here's the thing is, you may find lenders that will turn a blind eye to that. But technically, it's occupancy fraud. So when that gets brought up to me, I lay it out for them. I'm like, look, if we're going to do that, if you're going to do that, that's an investment property. And look, most vacation homes purchases, they're putting 20% down anyhow. And occasionally we get the 10%. But the majority of people are putting at least 20% down on the vacation home anyhow. So what's the difference? It's a slightly higher interest rate when you go into the investment property. But look, if your profit margin is that slim, should you even be doing this? So, if the difference between the interest rate is 3/8% or 0.5%, is that really a make it or break it type of deal for you on your cash flow that you're going to have from that property? You might want to rethink being a so-called investor. In my opinion, like, holy moly. If you think that committing occupancy fraud is the answer because a specific lender was willing to turn a blind eye at it, I ask, where are your morals and ethics, right? Just because you could or can get away with it because maybe a particular loan officer is turning a blind eye to that, is it the right thing to do? Of course it's not. What's the definition of integrity? Doing the right thing when nobody is looking, right? You've been told, now are you going to do the right thing? Or are you going to, go for this property because of a 3/8 or 0.5% lower in interest rate? Mind-boggling to me, but we're seeing it happen. So are you saying that I can never turn this into an investment property? Didn't say that. The word intent. What is your intent with this property? If your intent right now is at some point down the road to turn it into an investment property, well, that's an investment property. Well, what if I just happen to change my mind? Well, then you happen to change your mind. I mean, those things happen all the time, right? I mean, people that buy a primary residence, 3 years, 5 years later, like, hey, we want to move, we want to upgrade, we want to get a larger home, we want to move closer to work, and we're going to turn this property into an investment property. That's totally allowed. It's legal. It's completely, there's no issue with that at all. Why? Because your intent, wholehearted intent when you bought this property is, it could be my primary residence. I have no intention at this moment in my life to turn this into a rental property. Same thing applies with a vacation home. Well, in a year, I'm going to turn this into a rental property or a vacation or a VRBO in a year. Well, your intent is there to turn it into a rental property. Again, intent. And that's where you got to start, my intent in 2 years, intent in 3 years, right? And that can start to get gray. For the most part, it's initially out of the gate for the first year, right? What is your intent for the next year with this property? For the most part, right? And that's where we're going with this. If your intent is to turn this thing into an Airbnb, that's an investment property, hate to tell you, and I don't care what your real estate group is telling you, your investment group, these gurus that buy all these properties, occupancy fraud is part of mortgage fraud, which is investigated by the FBI. Now, how could you get caught? A number of ways, but let's say you bought a vacation home and decided to Airbnb it earlier this year in 2021. Then you decide, come tax time in early 2022, you're doing your taxes and you decide to file a Schedule E on your tax return for the rental income. Well, you just self-incriminated. You just turned yourself in. You're filing rental income on the property you bought as a vacation home in early 2021. Like you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? I mean, that's how we find out. And this is how we find out when people later on down the road are trying to commit mortgage fraud, occupancy fraud, which I'm telling you, some of the things we come across on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis is very interesting. So somebody's trying to refinance their vacation property because interest rates dropped, right? From years ago. And we send an appraiser out there, needs to get appraised. Appraiser gives us the appraisal report back. It says there's tenants in the property. Red flags are going off, right? That's an investment property, not a vacation home. And, the response or the reasoning is, well, I was just, letting some people in there on a short-term thing, or I was just Airbnb-ing it for the weekend. Again, it's a rental property. It's an investment property. And then they try to backpedal from it. No, it's not. It's just a one-time thing. And it's like we pulled up the property on Airbnb, and here we are. We can see the property on Airbnb. It's a rental property. It's not a vacation home, even if you stay there for 2 weeks out of the year. So that's interesting. The other type of occupancy fraud that we see, now this is interesting as well, man, because there are loan originators that will break the rules and help the consumer commit occupancy fraud on this issue as well. So we get a consumer that wants to refinance, right, because the rates are low, and pull cash out because now the property's worth $100,000 more today than it was just 12 months ago. And they want to pull some monies out of the home. And we said, well, what are you pulling the monies out for? Debt consolidation, home improvements? No, I want to use it for down payment on my next home. Okay, what do you mean? Like, oh, we want to move. We want to buy another home. Like, and see, that's where a true mortgage professional calls a timeout and says, no, I can't do that for you. What do you mean? Well, follow me here. I'm going to cash you out as a primary occupant, right, on the property you're in right now, knowing that you intend, the word intent, to go buy another primary occupant, another primary residence here in the coming months. It's occupancy fraud. Well, you're saying I can't do the refi? I'm like, no, you can, but you're going to need to do it as an investment property. You want to take cash out of this property? You got to do it as an investment property because you're intending to turn the property into an investment property. And you're intending to buy a primary residence in 2 months from now, a different property. But you will get some loan officers that won't say anything about it. And they'll just do the refinance. And then here's what happens, okay? They won't say anything. They'll do the refinance for you as a primary residence, cash out. And now, 2 months later, you're gone, you're putting offers in a property, right? You want to buy another primary residence, and you get into underwriting. You get it accepted, you get into underwriting. And there's a likelihood the underwriter is going to catch this because that's what they're paid to do, is to catch funny stuff like this and be like, wait a minute. This credit report shows that they only had this mortgage, right on their property they're vacating for 2 months. Did they just cash out? Did they just refinance this as a primary and now they're doing this one as another primary 60 days later? They're going to investigate that. They're going to dive into that. I'm not saying it cannot be done. It may very well could be done with some letters of explanation, some compensating factors, but you're going to go through some interesting hurdles if you can get it done. The underwriter very well may put a kibosh to it and catch you on your occupancy fraud. I've seen that where a company said, look, we don't feel comfortable. We don't feel comfortable allowing this behavior to happen. This consumer just did a primary residence 54 days ago, and now he wants to do this one over here. 54 days later, he wants to do this property as a primary residence. That's an issue. So, anyhow, there are some intriguing things that we're seeing nowadays, and I'm seeing more and more of them. I've seen them for years, but of late, I'm seeing more and more of that. Remember, the word intent. What is your intent? With that said, it's Friday Coffee and Morgan Man Eric, baby. We'll see you.